Have you ever looked back on a decision you made and thought, what on earth was I thinking? Maybe it was an impulsive purchase that seemed like a great idea at the time, but now sits unused in your closet. Or perhaps you procrastinated on an important project, despite knowing the consequences. If you're like most people, you've probably had more than a few of these moments. But here's the thing. These seemingly irrational choices aren't just random lapses in judgment. They follow predictable patterns that affect all of us, even when we think we're being completely logical. And understanding these patterns can be the key to making better decisions in every area of our lives. Welcome to CEO's Library, the 1% Bookshelf. I'm your host, and today we're diving into Dan Ariely's groundbreaking book, Predictably Irrational: The Hidden Forces That Shape Our Decisions. This isn't just another pop psychology book. It's a fascinating journey into the quirks of the human mind, backed by rigorous experiments and real-world applications. By the end of this episode, you'll have a new understanding of why you make the choices you do, and more importantly, how to outsmart your own irrational tendencies. Let's start with a story that perfectly illustrates how easily our rational minds can be led astray. Imagine you're flipping through a magazine and you come across an ad for The Economist, offering 3 subscription options. 1. Online subscription for $59. 2. Print subscription for $125. 3. Print and online subscription for $125. Which one would you choose? If you're like most people, the third option seems like an obvious choice. After all, why pay $125 for just the print when you can get both print and online for the same price? It feels like you're getting a great deal. But here's where it gets interesting. Ariely ran an experiment with exactly these options, and then he ran it again with the middle option removed. Suddenly, most people chose the cheaper online-only subscription. The mere presence of that seemingly irrelevant middle option had pushed people towards the more expensive choice. This is the power of relativity in action. We don't have an innate sense of what things should cost or what makes a good deal. Instead, we make decisions by comparing the options in front of us. Marketers and retailers exploit this all the time. That's why you'll often see an expensive item right next to a ridiculously overpriced one. The expensive item suddenly seems reasonable by comparison. But relativity doesn't just affect our purchasing decisions. It influences how we see ourselves, our relationships, and our place in the world. We don't evaluate our lives in absolute terms, but in comparison to those around us. This is why a raise that puts you ahead of your peers can make you happier than a larger raise that leaves you behind them. Understanding this quirk of our psychology can help us make better decisions. Next time you're considering a purchase or even a major life choice, ask yourself, am I being influenced by arbitrary comparisons? What would I choose if I evaluated each option on its own merits? Now, let's move on to another powerful force that shapes our decisions: the allure of free. We all love getting something for nothing, but Ariely's research shows that free has a psychological pull far beyond its economic value. In one experiment, Ariely offered people a choice between 2 chocolates: a Hershey's Kiss for 1 cent or a Lindt truffle for 15 cents. Most people chose the Lindt truffle, recognizing it as the better chocolate despite the higher price. But when he lowered the price of each chocolate by 1 cent, making the Kiss free and the Lindt truffle 14 cents, something remarkable happened. Suddenly, most people chose the Hershey's Kiss. Economically, nothing had changed. The price difference between the 2 chocolates was still 14 cents. But psychologically, everything had changed. The word free triggered an emotional response that overwhelmed rational decision-making. We see this play out in the real world all the time. Free shipping often leads us to make purchases we otherwise wouldn't. Buy one, get one free deals can make us buy more than we need. Companies offer free trials knowing that many people will forget to cancel, even if they're not using the product. The power of free isn't all bad. It can be used for positive outcomes too. Want to encourage people to get health screenings or use public transportation? Making it free can be far more effective than a small charge. But being aware of this psychological trigger can help us avoid being manipulated by it. Next time you're tempted by something free, pause and ask yourself, would I want this if it cost a small amount? Am I getting something I actually need? Or am I being swayed by the emotional appeal of free? Now, let's talk about a force that can override even our strongest intentions: emotions and arousal. We like to think of ourselves as rational beings, capable of weighing pros and cons and making smart choices. But the truth is, our decisions are heavily influenced by our emotional state, often in ways we don't realize. Ariely conducted a fascinating and somewhat risque experiment to demonstrate this. He asked a group of male college students a series of questions about sexual behavior and decision-making. Would they be willing to engage in morally questionable behavior to obtain sex? Would they take safety precautions? Then he had them answer the same questions again, but this time while in a state of sexual arousal. The results were striking. When aroused, the participants were far more likely to say they'd engage in risky or unethical behavior. They were less likely to say they'd use protection. In other words, their carefully considered moral standards went out the window in the heat of the moment. This doesn't just apply to sexual decisions. Any strong emotion, anger, fear, excitement, can lead us to make choices we later regret. Think about impulse purchases made while upset, or rash emails sent in the heat of anger. So, how can we protect ourselves from our own emotions? Ariely suggests a few strategies. First, recognize that you're likely to make poor decisions when in a heightened emotional state. If possible, delay important choices until you've cooled down. Second, try to make important decisions in advance when you're in a neutral emotional state. This is why many people find success with meal planning or automated savings. They're removing in-the-moment decision-making from the equation. Lastly, practice self-awareness. Learn to recognize when your emotions are running high and have a plan for those moments. Maybe it's taking 3 deep breaths before responding to an email or calling a friend before making a big purchase. The more you can create space between the emotion and the decision, the more likely you are to make a choice you won't regret. Now, let's tackle a problem we've all faced: procrastination. We know we should start that project, make that phone call, or begin that workout routine. We have the best intentions, and yet we put it off, often until it's too late. Why do we do this? And more importantly, how can we stop? Ariely conducted an experiment with his students to explore this. He gave them 3 papers to write over the course of the semester and allowed them to set their own deadlines. The only rule was that once set, the deadlines couldn't be changed. Late papers would be penalized. Rationally, the best strategy would be to set all the deadlines for the end of the semester, giving maximum flexibility. But that's not what most students did. Many spread out their deadlines over the semester. And here's the kicker: the students who set earlier deadlines for themselves got better grades. This illustrates a key insight about procrastination. We know we have self-control problems, and we value tools that help us overcome them. The deadlines acted as a commitment device, forcing the students to start working earlier than they might have otherwise. So how can we apply this in our own lives? One strategy is to break large tasks into smaller, concrete deadlines. Instead of write book, try write first draft of chapter 1 by next Friday. Make these deadlines public or attach a consequence to missing them. Another approach is to use what behavioral economists call temptation bundling. This involves linking something you need to do with something you want to do. For example, only allowing yourself to watch your favorite TV show while at the gym, or treating yourself to a fancy coffee while working on your taxes. Remember, procrastination isn't a character flaw. It's a common human tendency that we can learn to manage with the right strategies. By understanding the psychology behind it, we can set ourselves up for success. Now, let's explore a concept that has huge implications for both personal relationships and business: the difference between social norms and market norms. To illustrate this, Ariely asks us to imagine a Thanksgiving scenario. You've just finished a wonderful Thanksgiving dinner at your mother-in-law's house. The turkey was perfectly cooked, the stuffing was delicious, and the pumpkin pie was just like you remember from childhood. Feeling grateful, you stand up, pull out your wallet, and ask, "Mom, for all the love you've put into this, how much do I owe you?" Can you imagine the uncomfortable silence that would follow? You've just committed a major social faux pas by trying to apply market norms, paying for a service, to a situation governed by social norms, family members doing kind things for each other. This distinction between social and market norms is crucial. Social norms are the warm, fuzzy guidelines of friendly requests and favors. Market norms are the cold, hard rules of wages, prices, rents, costs, and benefits. When these norms collide, trouble often follows. Ariely gives the example of a daycare center that started fining parents for picking up their children late. They thought it would discourage tardiness. Instead, late pickups increased. Why? The fine had shifted the situation from social norms, I should pick up my child on time because it's the right thing to do, to market norms, I can pay for extra childcare time if I need it. This has huge implications for how businesses interact with their customers and employees. Companies often try to foster a sense of family and community, but then undermine it with actions that emphasize the market relationship. Think of a company that talks about how much they value their employees, then lays off staff to boost short-term profits. In our personal lives, we need to be careful about introducing market norms into social relationships. Paying your friends for favors, for instance, can change the nature of the friendship. And once market norms enter the picture, it's very difficult to go back to social norms. So, what's the takeaway? Be aware of which norms are operating in a given situation, and be careful about switching between them. In business, if you want to foster loyalty and goodwill, emphasize social norms. If you need to enforce strict guidelines, stick to market norms. Don't try to have it both ways. And in personal relationships, remember that not everything should be a transaction. Sometimes a heartfelt thank you is worth far more than any amount of money. As we wrap up, let's recap some of the key insights we've explored from Predictably Irrational. 1. We don't have an absolute understanding of value, but make decisions based on relative comparisons. 2. The allure of free can lead us to make irrational choices. 3. Our decisions are heavily influenced by our emotional state, often in ways we don't realize. 4. We struggle with self-control and procrastination, but can create strategies to overcome these tendencies. 5. Understanding the difference between social and market norms is crucial for both business and personal relationships. But perhaps the most important takeaway is this: our irrationality is not random. It follows predictable patterns, which means we can learn to recognize and counteract it. By understanding the hidden forces that shape our decisions, we can make better choices in our personal lives, our careers, and our businesses. So, here's your challenge. Over the next week, try to catch yourself in moments of irrationality. Maybe you'll notice yourself being swayed by a decoy option while shopping. Perhaps you'll recognize the pull of procrastination as you put off an important task. Or you might observe how your emotions are influencing a decision. Don't judge yourself for these moments. Instead, be curious. Ask yourself, what's really driving this decision? Is it aligned with my true goals and values? What would I choose if I were in a completely rational state of mind? Remember, the goal isn't to become perfectly rational. That's neither possible nor desirable. Our irrational quirks are part of what makes us human. They drive our creativity, our passions, and our connections with others. The goal is to understand our irrationality so we can harness it when it's helpful and mitigate it when it's not. In his book, Ariely writes, "We are pawns in a game whose forces we largely fail to comprehend. But by reading Predictably Irrational and applying its insights, you're no longer just a pawn. You're becoming a player who understands the rules of the game, even the hidden ones. So the next time you're faced with a difficult decision, remember the lessons from this book. Take a step back, consider the context, recognize the forces at play, and then make your choice, not as a perfectly rational being, but as a predictably irrational human who's aware of their own tendencies and biases. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of Predictably Irrational. Until next time, keep reading, keep learning, and keep challenging your own assumptions. This is CEO's Library, the 1% Bookshelf, signing off.